Welcome to the dev commentary for Temporal Arena. This game was created for our CGT 245 final project. Our team was made up of 3 members: Michael, who helped with the planning early in the game's development; Maggie, who helped work on the art aspect of the game with sprite work for items, pickups, and enemies; and finally, I, Garner, worked on programming of a game, writing all the game systems, and I also compiled and did an art pass on all the sprites and assets made for the project.
Here is the level design part of our group project. We use many pixel art here to keep our style same. The pixel art use 16 x 16 color blocks to shape the objects. The darkness and lightness of one kind of color makes the object more vividly. And we create different kinds of objects like enemies, main characters, weapons, decorations, logo, and other functional objects for the game. The style is cute because of the 2D art. I created almost 100 sprites, and the Gunner helps me to improve them to be more dedicated. Then we pick some of them to be used in the game. In Temporal Arena, we have 3 time periods, so for each time period, we need to build different characters and enemies, which have to be in different styles.
One of the major challenges I had during this project was the fact that we pretty much planned more than we should have planned. And for example, an RPG roguelike, that's super complex, and one big complexity of that is the RPG battles in the first place. And this presented many challenges because in the RPG battles there was different elements, and all these elements were each complex in their own right. So one element would be the player attack, and since it's a roguelike, right, there would be a ton of attacks. There would be different items you could use, different special attacks, different normal attacks, and all these things might have different effects to them. Some might cause the enemy to pause for a turn or two. Some might cause the enemy to have a continuous bleed effect. Some might do something else, like it might just end the battle instantly. And all these different items and stuff had to be programmed separately, and it really cluttered up the whole code because there was just a bunch of different things. But I think in the end we were able to get a bunch of different items doing different effects, and it all runs smoothly, and so that's good. Another issue we had is you have different transitions between the areas and stuff, and like we were using grid-based movement, so like the triggers were kind of hard to do, and some things like teleporting between different rooms were a little complex because of the grid-based movement. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it wouldn't, and there's a bunch of little bugs like that. But in the end, we got those worked out, and it runs pretty smoothly. Finally, one of the major other elements of a game that we had a little issues with were the randomly generated rooms. Because in a roguelike, generally you have randomly generated environments, but that was super complex, and we didn't really have enough time to do that. So instead, we just made a demo level of what a traditionally randomly generated room would look like for our game. And so this was a little complex to do because I had to custom make everything. I had to make objects that would like props and stuff that would change each model depending on the time period and stuff, and rotate, and that took a bunch of time. I had to also work on making a special floor object so it would be like easily expandable, and also have a grid pattern on it to help the player understand that you're running on a grid-based movement and where the grid would be. And there was just a bunch of things like this. I had to get the enemies to all move on a grid-based movement, and also be able to switch depending on which time period, and if it were one of those enemies that changed on each time period. And I had to make global variables and stuff to determine each time period and stuff. But overall, it took a while, but I'm really happy with the result. I wasn't really sure if I would be able to have a easily changeable prop system, but I used data tables for the first time, and I was able to just make a big table and make a system where it dynamically changes, and that really helped when playing the level to add more unique aspects. So it's not always the same visually, even though it is technically the same in terms of like placement of objects and enemies. And that really just added a nice visual flair to it that I'm really happy with, and I hope to carry on to future projects. And yes.